All right, everybody. Welcome to, I don't even know what number episode of Real Hawk Talk it is. It has been so long since the boys, and we will have a non-boy identified gender person join the show for the first time in too long. But it's been a while since we've been here. It's been a while since there's been something worth talking about relative to the Seahawks. And boy, do we have something worth talking about today. I am Brian Nemhauser at Hawkblogger on Twitter. You can find us at Real Hawk Talk on Twitter or / Real Hawk Talk on YouTube and Facebook. / Hawkblogger on YouTube and Facebook, and can subscribe there. If you haven't already, this is a perfect time. Click subscribe, click the little bell, get notified when we go live, because you never know when the Seahawks are going to have something worth talking about, and we're going to be on to talk about it. So lots to do today. Let me welcome in the crew. We'll start with Evan Hill at Evan SEA. How is it going, dude?
It is good. Can we just take a second to appreciate that I am one of the 4 members who is always on time for this podcast? Nathan Ernst.
Oh,
I was here 1 o'clock. I was on.
Yeah. See,
yeah, under the wire, but I made it.
I was with you, Evan, when you were gonna say that you were early, but technically Nathan was exactly on time.
This is true.
Very punctual. Very punctual. I'm always very punctual.
See, I grew up with a mother who would set the clocks ahead 20 minutes, so we were always places early, and I actually found that as annoying as being late. So technically the best way to live your life is to always be on time. You're not wasting time being early. You're not wasting time being late. You're just exactly on time. Now, it stresses me out when Nathan's not here and Jeff's doing, God knows, like he's trying to travel through the internet at like dial-up speeds. But, you know, Nathan's usually here, so I'll give him that. Speaking of Nathan, Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11, or have you changed? I thought I saw a change recently. Are you still at Nathan E11?
Didn't. Yeah, still Nathan E11. So.
All right, cool. Welcome, dude.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's been a while.
It's good to see you. And we have a special guest today. We will hopefully get Jeff Simmons aboard, although he dialed in for a second with one of the worst angles and qualities of visual that I think we've seen on this show. And apparently I think he's golfing. So I don't think we're going to, I have the ability to admit or deny people on this show. And I don't know if I will admit Jeff, even if he joins. We'll see how that goes. But even without Jeff, we have got a special guest. Dana O'Gorman is joining us for the first time. And Dana's at Dana, DAYNA OG. That sounds like not O'Gorman. I thought you were really making a statement with that OG.
Well, I guess you could look at it that way. But
Dana.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about this trade. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. And Dana, tell folks a little bit about what you do. You're the editor and senior NFL writer for Our Turf Football. You cover the NFC West and the AFC West. You're a member of the Pro Football Writers Association of America. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So like you mentioned, I write for Our Turf Football. I'm one of the co-owners over there. Used to be called NFL Female. A lot of people knew us under that name, but we switched that over about 3 years ago when we bought the website from the original owner. And we are a website full of female sports writers. And we started off as fans and became writers, and then really became writers. And we just have really enjoyed it. We like to give kind of a different perspective a lot of times. We have 4 main writers. Each one of us covers 2 divisions, and I think I have the 2 best divisions in the entire league. So between the AFC and the NFC West, they keep me pretty busy covering all 8 teams. It's a lot of fun. So then we do a little podcast here and there also, but for the most part, we just write. So we have a great time.
Awesome. Well, thanks for finding the time to join us.
Yeah.
Now, I think the news of the day is that the Seahawks have traded Bradley McDougald. And, you know, I don't know how people feel. A lot of us are pretty attached to how Bradley had played for the Seahawks, and that he had a very affordable contract. Evan, you've talked a lot about how Bradley McDougald was one of the best signings of the Schneider era for the price he had. How do you feel about them moving on?
I couldn't tell if you were being sarcastic at the beginning or not.
Oh, I'm a little bit sarcastic.
So you are being sarcastic.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, I think in terms of value, didn't they snipe him from the Buccaneers? Like it was either 2 or 3 years ago. He was a free agent, and they signed him on like a 1-year prove it type of deal. It was like really cheap though. It was like $800K. So I guess there was really zero risk from the Seahawks side. But I mean, it's kind of like one of the underrated parts of this trade is I don't mind that they gave him up, but at the same time, like I am going to miss him. I think he was a serviceable starter at safety, and he had a couple big hits, a couple big plays every once in a while. I thought relative to his contract value, he was a very, very serviceable starter for us, and I think he was a locker room leader too. I'm gonna miss him. I hope he does well in New York, but obviously Jamal Adams is a huge upgrade.
Jamal Adams. Yeah, I forgot about that part of the trade. So yeah, let's talk about that. And let's get initial reactions. And Dana, let's start with you. The news broke yesterday around 1:00, I think, somewhere around there. How did you first hear about it? What was your first reaction to the news?
Well, when this broke, I was actually at my nephew's basketball tournament, and the service inside was terrible. And so I missed it at the beginning. I didn't get that alert at all until I walked into the parking lot. And then, there had been, we all knew Jamal Adams had put the Seahawks on his list of teams he was okay being traded to. And so I wouldn't say I was shocked when it happened until I learned what all the details of the trade were. Then I was really surprised that Seattle did it, but not in a bad way. Thrilled. I was so excited. And it was more exciting even after you saw his reaction to it. I think that added a lot to it, but I was really excited. I thought it was a good trade, and I'm totally okay with the terms, which I know not everyone is, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah, I was thrilled.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you, Nathan, and we'll get back to you, Evan, give you an honest chance to respond. But we've talked a lot about compensation and deals like this and some of the history, and there's absolutely different sides of how people react. Where was your initial gut when you heard of the move, and then separately once you heard about the compensation?
I think I was a little too surprised to react. So I'm over at my mom's house, so I'm not even home or anything. We're staying over with her, and I have been mostly off Twitter, and so I had just happened to check my phone and refresh Twitter, and there was the Schefter oh, here are the terms of the deal, and I was like, I did 3 double checks, that's a blue check, right? That's the Schefter, right? I was really? I mean, I was pretty blown away by the terms of the deal. I mean, that was probably the next big thing. I mean, 2 first-round picks is a lot, and so it was kind of a lot to digest. The trade for me kind of came out of nowhere. I knew that he was on the list, but I had not heard rumblings that something was imminent or anything like that. And then, there's the terms, and they gave up a ton, right? It's not the Clowney trade at all. So there's no immediate yeah, we got a great player, and then we fleeced them, and so it's kind of oh boy, that's a lot. And then my mind went to the safety situation right now, where they spent a high second-round pick on Marquise Blair, and what does that mean for him? And so I still don't think I have a real solid opinion or hot take on this quite yet.
Let me give you some context real quick, actually, to the timeline. So this is something I learned after the fact. Jamal Adams has a $2.75 million roster bonus that is due on the 5th day of training camp. Okay. And I think that may have acted as a sort of, I don't know if artificial is the right word, but an artificial deadline in terms of if, the Jets had kept him past, day 4 and day 5 rolls around, they have to pay him a lump sum of $2.75 million. So the Seahawks, by trading for him, will absorb and pay that roster bonus. So I think that is potentially why this came out of nowhere, and, training camp is quickly approaching.
Well, that's interesting. And Evan, let's get your honest take when you first heard about the deal. And specifically, I mean, you've been talking about this trade a little bit, even leading up to this. how do you feel about the potential impact? Because they're going to have to sign this guy to an extension at some point. How do you feel about the impact that could have to extending Chris Carson?
Brian, you leave me speechless sometimes. You leave me speechless. That's a whole different conversation because I think they will end up extending Chris Carson. But I mean, I was shocked by the compensation. I may be one of those people who probably overvalues draft picks to a certain extent. So I'm not, opposed to that argument at all. But 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick is some heavy compensation. I get he's a super premium player. He's entering his 4th season, I think, in the NFL. So very young player. He's actually younger than LJ Collier, which is hilarious to me. I saw a ton of people tweeting that. So in terms of, I will say this. At first, I was shocked by the compensation and frankly pretty devastated by the compensation. and I was very pissed off. I was like, this is a trade that like bad teams make. Like the reason I was so excited by the Frank Clark trade is because like, that's what how do I word this in a way that makes sense? Like trading for a player where you trade intense, capital and having to pay him is typically, and I don't think this is a divisive or controversial comment, is typically unwise. Like it hasn't worked historically in the past very often. So when they traded Frank Clark and, got a first round and a second round pick and whatever, blah, 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 I was stoked about that because they didn't have to pay him then. Jamal Adams is, the other side of the coin. He's a defensive back. So I think everybody historically has been like, pass coverage is more important, at least more predictable or more consistent than the pass rush. So I'm glad they did it on a defensive back. I guess my concern is this. I don't know if there's many players in the NFL that I'd be willing, like remove this trade for a second. I don't know if there's many players in the NFL that I'd be willing to pay 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick for. Now, Jamal Adams is near the top of that list in terms of the players I would do it for, but I'm thinking about the mid to long-term future here, not the short term. Like obviously this makes the Seahawks better in the next 2 to 3 years, 4 years even, of course, no debate there. But building through the draft where you have solid club control on a rookie, a draft pick that you nail for at least 4 years. And if it's in the first round, 5 years where you get the 5th-year option, that's the best way, the ideal way to build a sustainable pattern of success. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm super excited about the player and I'm progressing through the stages of grief here. So you kind of hear me doing this in real time. But at first, to answer your question, I was pretty shocked by the trade capital.
Well, I think I'll share where my head's at on a couple of things. So one, I mean, Nathan, you talked about it being a surprise, and gotta admit, it was a surprise to me. Like, and I don't know. This is not the first, second, third, fourth, fifth time that the Seahawks have made a move of this magnitude. Maybe not for this level of compensation, but a tectonic level trade for a big name, and that coming or going. Include Frank Clark in that list of trades, right? So I don't know why I continue to be surprised by these things, but I was. And then I have two reactions to it. So one, I give you a lot of crap, Evan, and I really enjoy doing it. But I think there's 2 ways. So one, if you're acquiring talent for your team through trade, like a player that's established and already good versus a Chris Clemens trade is a different kind of trade. If you're trading for a guy that is a diamond in the rough, that's one thing. But if you're acquiring your talent, that's established talent through trade, and you're giving up draft capital, or you're doing it through free agency, you're doing it the wrong way. Like, period. That is the wrong way to manage a roster. That is the wrong way to manage cap. Like, I even question if it's the right way to acquire like talent that is intent on playing well. Like a lot of these guys that end up, if they're very good and they want to be traded, a lot of times it's about money and it's not about a guy that's really in it for winning. Like, so anyway, I think there's all sorts of reasons to say, wow, this is not a good thing. And then that was one part of the reaction. But really my very first reaction was Jamal Adams is he's not a blue chipper. He's like a platinum chipper. He is not a Pro Bowler. He is an All Pro. He's not a single, second team All Pro. He's a first team All Pro. He's 24 years old. He is a 6th overall pick. The Seahawks' ability to acquire a talent like that there's not a lot of other ways for them to do it other than having to potentially get very fortunate and hit on that in the late first round, something like find a George Kittle in the 3rd or 4th. Like, it happens. It definitely happens, but it's a lot harder to find that level of talent with where the Seahawks have been drafting. So look, I was excited, and I also understand the like criticism of the implications and the way to do it. For me, that was a 3rd or 4th reaction to it. And that really gets back less about this trade and more about the fact that they blew Tedrick Thompson. They blew Lano Hill. We don't know what's going to happen relative to Marquise Blair. Like, they've blown this position pretty badly. Other than the Quandre Diggs trade, which was another trade, but that was a great trade in terms of compensation. So that it's a complex piece, but like, I'm kind of with Dana. I was like, hey, Seahawks got better. Like, I would say Jamal Adams is probably the 2nd best player on the Seahawks.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, remember, this is all pending physical. So I'm not saying Bradley McDougall is going to pull a Jeremy Lane here, but it's not official. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
I hadn't thought of that. That's actually, like, I'm not like worried about it, but I don't think Bradley McDougall's right. I mean, I don't think that's really even a secret, right? Like, so if he's in any way like a thing the Jets want, that is, like, I guess mildly concerning. But I can't imagine the Jets aren't aware of his history and stuff either.
Yeah, I tweeted that this morning because like I was sitting there reading the paper and I was like, pending physical. I read that. I was like, oh crap. Like, because McDougall's knee, like, it's not right. And he like played better last year, but he also clearly is like, I think he's limited in time. I think he's probably maybe got a few more years left. And the thing that makes me feel most comfortable is, like, Nathan, can you imagine them being like, yeah, we're going to risk the Seahawks pulling back their 2 firsts and a 3rd, over, like,
well, wouldn't it just like adjust the trade compensation like it did with the Texans?
They could try, but that's a huge risk. Is someone else going to give them 2 firsts and a 3rd?
No, they would have done it already if they were going to. I mean, literally, it's not like this is just like new yesterday. I want to take a second, if we can, and go back to something that Evan said. So he said that, this makes Seattle better for the next 3 to 4 years, no question, but you worry about the long term. So think about what you just said. This makes Seattle better for the next 3 to 4 years. That takes Russell Wilson to 34, 35. That takes Pete Carroll through his career. And so they don't care. They are in for the next 3 to 4 years. So yes, we might be, bemoaning this 5-6 years down the way. But at that point, who cares if they've won at least one more Super Bowl? And how does Seattle win? How do they get there? They get there through their defense. Now, that is no diss to Russell Wilson. I love and adore the way he plays because he's a team player. I love everything about him. But this is what Seattle fans wanted. They wanted more weapons around Russell Wilson, which they got. I like Philip Dorsett, so I'm really excited about that addition. I don't think he's a superstar, but I think he's good. DK Metcalf is going to get nothing but better. And I think Chris Carson will come back strong. I really like Chris Carson, but the defense is where we were having so many problems last year. So if this makes the defense better, and then if Dunbar plays too, holy cow, then 3 to 4 years, yeah, I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
I love that, Dana. And I want to ask this crew, because Evan and Nathan often represent, more cautious, conservative side of some of these things. I would just say for the knowing that I think we all agree the compensation is not a good thing to be giving up in general. I think we're aligned on that's not the way to build a roster. But if the Seahawks win a Super Bowl, or let me put it this way, what will it take for this to have been a worthwhile deal, where you will not bemoan the compensation? What's the accomplishment that has to happen?
I think like a deep playoff push, like an NFC championship appearance. And I know that's a team accomplishment, but Dana, I think you absolutely nailed it, actually. I mean, if the Seahawks win a Super Bowl because of this, Let's give him 6 extra first round picks. So thank you. Like I don't care at that point. So you're 100% on the money with that. I guess my concern is this though, and it's kind of like my counter argument to that. Are the Seahawks before this trade 1 Jamal Adams away from being serious Super Bowl contenders? And I'm not saying they aren't. I'm just not confident in saying yes. So that's my only obstacle.
So I think, in my opinion, I don't think they were 1 Jamal Adams away, but what they were was actually having running backs on the roster that aren't injured away, plus a Jamal Adams, plus a pass rusher. And I know not everyone was excited about Bruce Irvin coming back, but he had 9 sacks last year. Nobody in Seattle had that. And so you add that with the 3.5 sacks that Adams had last year. I mean, come on, 12.5 sacks. So I think that there those little bits and pieces where they can get better, plus the superstar of Jamal Adams. I think that could add up to a Super Bowl for this team. But I'm optimistic. So
no, that's fair. I'm young and broken, so I fully understand you.
Wait, I'm seeing that the Seahawks released Brandon Jackson.
Whoa.
I think now the Cardinals got down to 80 players today. I would not be surprised if a lot of teams follow that.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Just announced.
Brian, what's the better news in the last 24 hours?
Well, I know where Jeff would be on this. I mean, like this is like, I feel so bad that Jeff Simmons is not here to celebrate this moment. Nobody dislikes Brandon Jackson on this roster more than Jeff.
Adding Jamal Adams, is that more of a positive than like moving Brandon Jackson?
Maybe a little.
Well, this is improvement from both directions, right? Like I think
improvement from subtraction.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, let's just assume. I assume you guys come to the same conclusion I do. The fact that they're releasing Brandon Jackson, a defensive lineman, means that they're about to sign Jadeveon Clowney, right?
Clowney or Griffin.
Yeah. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm still kind of got a little holdout for Everson Griffin a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, but one or the other, please.
Nathan, I wanted to hear from you on that question though. Like, what do you think? What do you think would make this trade a good trade? In looking back once you've had some time to see the performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not really safe to say if Adams stays healthy, but like obviously he has to stay healthy, right? I mean, otherwise it becomes a very different thing. But I don't think that he needs to do much more than or be anything more than what he's been, right? I mean, he's a great player. And so if he can just keep that up and, no regressions, just stay healthy, like I don't think that there needs to be anything for him personally, right? I mean, the thing that I am really hopeful to see is that this pass defense gets a lot better, right? And they're adding in Dunbar, right? And so that's part of it. But if they add him and he's still the great player that he is, and we're talking about like the 16th or 17th best defense, right? Like, kind of have to wonder what you actually accomplished by giving up all that to get him, right? Because if he continues to be great, but your team doesn't take the step forward that you want, then it doesn't matter. So putting it in terms of like a playoff push is hard because a lot of stuff goes into that, right? And that's putting that on any one player, even just a quarterback, can be difficult, right? But I do think you at least hope that you see some kind of a step forward in their pass defense and hopefully their defense overall.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the things that Jamal Adams can directly impact, and I think that's what you're getting at, Nathan, if he maintains an all-pro level of performance and the Seahawks sign him to an extension, I think I will consider that like a good deal. I think that's, it's just finding a way to get an all-pro player. I will consider it at least a push, if nothing else. As far as like putting it over the top would be this defense looking competent, maybe better than that. And Dana, you said if they're going to go back to a Super Bowl, it's going to be on the defense. I don't know if this is what you meant. I will tell you what I interpret that to mean.
Okay.
I think that the defense has been holding this team back. And I know others have other opinions about what's been holding this team back, but I think the defense has been so bad that it had put like way too much strain on other parts of the team to pull through. If this defense can be top half of the league legitimately, then I think Russell Wilson and the offense is good enough or can be good enough to win a Super Bowl. And they just weren't really close to that, in my opinion, last year. I thought they were an awful defense for most of the time. So, yeah, I don't think they have to be the best unit on the team in order for them to win the Super Bowl. I just think
Just top 15 would do the job.
Top 10, I'd feel better about.
I think we all would.
Right?
Right.
I mean, so interestingly, I mean, like, speaking of Super Bowls and what this does, I agree with you, Evan. I don't think that this makes the Seahawks the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl. Different thing, right? Are they in better position to win a Super Bowl now than they were yesterday?
Of course.
I think we all, yeah, absolutely, right?
And isn't that what you want from an off season? You know, there's so many negative Nellies out there who are like, oh, you know, we did this, or why didn't we do this, or we didn't need a safety, we needed a pass rusher, blah, 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 blah. But when you look at the bottom line of it, is you have to look at the players that are out there, the players that are available, the you know, the people who want to be traded, that, you know, who is out there that is within Seattle's grasp, and you get a player that makes you that much better, then that's a win. I realize that it's a lot to give up, but it's a win.
Yes, Dana, I agree with you.
So, I think so. And, you know, we look at Russell Wilson and we want to, you know, we have this premier elite talent in our quarterback. And look what he managed to do with that horrid defense last year. And I think that's what you guys were trying to say. If we can even make this defense serviceable, top 15, top 10, Russell Wilson elevates everything else about it. And he managed to get us, you know, get Seattle to, you know, and was it 11-win season last year? And so, and I want to say this, and you guys can do what you want. This season does not count. I just want to keep saying that out loud. I've said it a million times over on Our Turf. We cannot judge what is going to happen in the future by what happens this season, because it's such a weird season and there's so many odd things going on. And so we have those, you know, people in our fan base who will throw a fit if everything doesn't work this first season. And I just keep saying, 20 doesn't count. 21.
Well, wait. If we win the Super Bowl, it counts.
No, you know, but you know what I mean?
Like, more than any other season, right?
Well, yes, I get that. But do you know what I mean? I mean, if things don't go well, we can't say that it was a bad trade. We can't say it was a bad idea, because who knows? I keep saying, wait until an entire position group has to be quarantined for 14 days.
Well, I think
we'll figure that out.
I think
good point.
There's two things I want to sort of unpack there. Number one, I actually wanted to bring this up with you guys. It's sort of a random talking point. Do you guys think there will be any Seahawks players that opt out of this season?
I would be surprised.
Brian, Nathan?
The whole situation with the minimum guys where they can opt out and get some money guaranteed. And I could, again, not having a great grasp of what all that's about, potentially maybe you see some kind of bottom of the roster types take advantage of that. But no, I mean, Russell Wilson's already posting videos and everything of him working out with all these different people. And I don't think so.
Brian, you in the same boat?
Yeah, it's just hard. I think it's impossible to predict. There's nobody that comes to mind that I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's a real risk of that. Could there be one person out of, what's the roster limit now? It's not going to be 53 anymore, right?
55, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's 2
Well,
more.
then practice squad on top of it, but yeah.
I figure like 60 odd players. Like, could there be one? Sure. Is it going to be anyone that's like, you know, a guy that you count on? I don't know. Probably not is where I would guess.
But the second sort of element I wanted to unpack with what you said, Dana, is as somebody who's sort of I don't want to say pessimistic about this trade, because I'm really excited about the player, but I am, you know, uncomfortable with the trade compensation. I don't think we'll have a true understanding of who the winner of this trade is for another
at least
4 to 5 years. I don't think this is like something where we can quickly say that. I saw tweets today that were like, the Jets won this trade like right now. And I'm just not, I can't buy that yet.
No, they keep giving away their first round draft picks. So apparently, you know, it doesn't matter. We won't know. And, you know, it depends. Now, I think that the new GM, is this his first or second year? I can't remember. And so, you know, they'll be interesting to see what he does with those picks and that sort of thing. But then you have to look at the college football element of it. Some of these players aren't going to play ball this year. And so then you're drafting in a question mark. And so who you haven't seen play this or who you have. And so I think that when you look at the brass tacks of all of it, that there's always, Seattle's not the best at the first round picks. or they trade out of them completely and don't have one, versus then you add in a questionable draft. I don't think that giving up next year's first round pick is as big of a deal as maybe it would
I
be
am very sympathetic to that argument, actually. I think that's the best argument I've heard that's resonated with me is it's going to be 1 year less of film on those college prospects that come out next year. It could be a shit show. It could be like that 2013 NFL draft. It really could. But I think that's the best argument I've heard.
I mean, I don't really like talking about sports or COVID in like a sports frame, because obviously the sports part of it is like way down the list of what's important here, right? But like, I think that there are, like you guys are talking about, a ton of interesting implications because of the pandemic and everything on this trade, right? One is the one that you just talked about. What are we going to know about these college players? What kind of a college season is it going to be? And how will that affect scouting and drafting and all that? The other thing is, you just traded for a player who you're going to have to pay, and you might have just lost a year of him, right? And so that is a negative thing too, that now, you know, you're not trading for 24-year-old Jamal Adams. Maybe you're really trading for 25-year-old Jamal Adams. And, you know, I mean, if he has a lost season, and, you know, football careers go quick. We were talking about it in the DMs last night about how, you know, Earl was 24 when Seattle lost to the Patriots, which means that if Adams plays for Seattle, as long as Earl played for Seattle after he turned 24, Adams will only be here for 4 years, right? And now you're talking about potentially losing him. Now, obviously, Adams, they're probably going to try to keep him. Like, this is the guy they're going to want around for a long time. But, you know, if we went back and told you in 2014 that Earl's got 4 years left, like, a lot of people would have laughed at you, and they would have been wrong. And so there's huge implications on how the season's going to play out, how the college season is going to play out, you know, in terms of the coronavirus and this trade.
I think that's really a great point. It's funny, before I started getting concerned about the compensation and the trade at all, my second reaction was, yeah, but what if there's no season this year? Like, that definitely crossed my mind. Like, how does that change things? Does that, like, we don't yet know, I don't think, what that means in terms of player contracts, you know, actually tolling.
No pay, no play, or no play, no pay is what the last thing that I read is. If they don't play, they don't get paid for it. But the year does count on their contract, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I haven't heard definitively on
Yeah,
that.
I don't think it's been 100% yet.
That's the thing. So, I mean, like, that's an open question. I think, to your point, Dana, like, half joking about, you know, whether it counts or not, but look, one thing alone, forget, like, there's a million other variables, but we know that there's either going to be no fans in the stands or very few. And imagine football with no home field advantage, where basically, like, let's assume that there's no fans in the stands. Let's just start there. Like, maybe there's some, but let's assume that is there any difference playing on one field than another with no fans? Like, it's pretty minor. It's not like baseball where there's literally different dimensions, right? It's the same field. And what does that mean? I mean, in some ways you could argue maybe that means the best team does win in a situation like that. Like, right?
I was talking on another podcast I did that the two teams that'll be most affected by if there are no or few fans is Seattle and Kansas City, because that's where they rely on that fan base so much. But really, other than weather, if you remove that element, other than weather, you know, no one wants to play in Green Bay in December and that sort of thing. You really does. It completely levels the playing field. And even if they have like 25%, we know Jacksonville's going to have 25% fans at most. New York says they can't have any. It's not going to be enough to make that impact. And so then we might see some really fantastic games being at a little bit more of a level playing field.
Evan, I mean, the one team that's not going to be affected by this will be the San Francisco 49ers, right?
George Kittle is in shambles right now. I'm just telling you, George Kittle had nightmares last night.
Well, but before we get to Kittle, right, like, they don't usually play in front of fans, right? So the 49ers...
Yeah, there's no difference whatsoever post-COVID-19 in terms of situational stadium environment. There's absolutely no difference.
Yeah, but now we could talk about the Kittle impact. So it has been entertaining to watch 49ers fans completely go into justification mode. They were, I don't know if you noticed, but they were frothing at the mouth at the notice that Adams might go to them. Like they were all in. So were Dallas Cowboy fans. They were like, I saw all these
Dallas was in.
articles about what it would mean. Like there wasn't the same level of frothing for Seahawks fans, by the way. I mean, we were all excited about the potential, but no one was really obsessing about it. And then as soon as the news broke, like 49ers fans are like, oh, we don't have to trade for our talent. We just draft it. Jimmy Garoppolo, D Ford, what was their receiver, Emmanuel Sanders? Like, oh my gosh. But anyway, and now they're saying that the only reason the Seahawks made this trade is to stop George Kittle.
I mean, George Kittle wasn't a threat before Jamal Adams. He's just not a concern. He's not even on the radar. Like fourth best NFC West tight end. Boo-hoo. So scary.
Welcome to the show.
Love
Nathan.
So one of the things that I had mentioned in the group chat again last night was, this is a trade that Seattle's made a few times before, and it's yet to work out well for them, right? And, we can argue about Jimmy Graham and how good he was. And, I don't know that you can say giving up a first for what they got out of Jimmy Graham was a net positive, right? But there were clear, fit questions with Jimmy Graham, right? And then also he had injuries and other things. So, I feel like, and I said this about Sheldon Richardson, so I'm going to temper myself a little bit here, but I feel like Jamal Adams is actually a really great fit for this team. I mean, one, Pete, while he struggles to understand passing sometimes, does understand trying to defend it. And so, you've got, obviously Pete is going to have a lot of ideas and very specific ideas and ways that he wants to use Jamal Adams, right? So that's just a good fit anyways. But I think the way that Jamal Adams plays, you look at what Seattle had a ton of problems with last year, right? And, end arounds and some of that kind of stuff and some of the quicker stuff, and how the Rams play offense and how they're trying to kind of send teams horizontally and vertically. It's tough, right? And so I think, though, Jamal Adams patches a lot of those specific holes that they had. So while, Jimmy Graham was a great player when they traded for him, they traded a lot for him, there were some fit questions, right? Jamal Adams is a great player, but there are none of those fit questions. And so that's one of the things that I think that will help this, when we talk about what do you want to see out of this trade to make it worthwhile? If he can come in and plug some of those very specific problems that they had last year, that's another big thing that he can bring here, that helps, ease the pain of what they had to give up for him.
It's a great call out. And I'll go, I think, Evan, you were going to say something, but Adams is one of those really unique players where it's you could say, oh man, his best asset is an amazing run defender. That's great because the Seahawks have had a ton of trouble stopping the run the last few years, and the 49ers just dominate them a lot of times in the run, right? So that's a great thing. But that probably means he's not a great pass defender. Well, actually, he's a fantastic player, both in coverage. You're well, he's probably just good in zone. He's actually great in zone, and he's great in man. Okay. Well, maybe he's not a good tackler. Nope. He's a fantastic tackler. Maybe he can only play at the line of scrimmage. Nope. He can play free safety. Now, he's not going to play single high, but he can play left or right safety. He's played edge corner. He's actually can play defensive end. He's the most effective defensive back rushing the passer maybe ever in his first few years in the league. So I think people are trying to classify this guy as he's the next Cam. I don't think the Seahawks have ever had a player like Jamal Adams. I mean, I can't say I know him really well, but everything I've looked at and watched him play, he's a pretty unique dude, and what he brings and how he can help the Seahawks defense in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, he's a Swiss Army knife of a player, and that's what does Pete Carroll love more than a player that can play multiple positions, can be moved all over the field, and help him in different packages. So it is a logical fit that way. I could see Pete kind of salivating at the idea of having that type of player, and so I do think he'll fit. And once again, I mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to say it again. And then his reaction to going to Seattle. I don't think that we can forget that I think that has a lot to do with the current head coach in New York. I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, his versatility, he knows where he fits. Look at those teams he listed off that he wanted to play for. Those are the teams that he wanted to, not just because they're good, but because they play the type of football he wants to play. I think that you can't replace Cam Chancellor. There isn't another player like him. And they wouldn't want to. They need more versatility for what they have now. And he fits that bill perfectly.
One element that sort of concerned me, and I don't mean to be pessimistic here, is I was fairly surprised to see that a negotiated extension wasn't a part of the trade deal. So now I don't know if that was maybe that was from Adams' side, maybe that was from the Seahawks side. We don't know, but
When is that ever come back to bite Seattle, trading for a player on the last year without a contract?
So they traded 2 first-round picks and a third pick. Obviously, he's in the long-term plans, but like his value can only go up. And we kind of saw this with like the Laramie Tunsil situation, left tackle. Dolphins traded to the Texans, where I think broke records and got like 25 or something insane a year. It's just going to cost the Seahawks a few extra million per year if they don't extend him soon. So that was, as a cap guy, that was surprising to me that wasn't negotiated a part of the trade.
Well, the interesting piece, I mean, the one foreshadowing has been, I don't know if you guys followed, I assume you all follow Jake Heaps. He's been a friend of the show and all that, but he's also really close to Russell. And when he tweets something, sometimes it feels like he's got a little bit of an inside perspective, I will say. And it was maybe a week ago, maybe a little bit longer. He tweeted something like, initially I was against the Jamal Adams trade idea until I heard that he'd be willing to come to a winning team and not renegotiate right away. He either wants to go to a team that's going to pay him right away or go to a winning team and be part of that culture. Regardless of how you feel about whether that's true or not, it's possible that part of what made this happen right now is the Seahawks are like, we don't extend guys with 2 years left on their deal. Mm-hmm. Adams I've heard people say it's 1 year. He's got this year and next year, on his deal. And so the Seahawks can have him play this year and then have the 5th-year extension. And then technically they have the franchise tag. Now, if it comes out that they agreed again to not do the franchise tag to a player, then I will not be thrilled, because I think that leverage helps get deals done, as we've seen with Clowney, unfortunately. But yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting that they didn't do that. And maybe we'll find out that they'll extend him quickly. My gut is they're not going to extend him this season. They're going to play him under this contract, but that's just an initial guess.
And that could be also due to the question marks surrounding the season. They might want to wait. And maybe that's what they said. Listen, we need to wait out and see what's going to happen this year. And then there's all the cap questions for next year and how long that's going to extend. So they have a little wiggle room to say, hey, we can't do this right now because there's too many question marks surrounding whatever. So give us this year. We'll talk to you again next year. Or maybe they said, we don't do that, which they have a history of not doing. You have 2 years left on your contract. They don't do. I have a question for you guys, though, which is the interviewer in me. So I apologize if I step on anybody's toes. But do you think this helps get the Clowney deal done?
The trade itself?
Yeah.
I think it does from 2 aspects. So trading Bradley McDougald, actually, this is one sort of point I wanted to hit home. The trade itself, offloading Bradley McDougald and, bringing in Jamal Adams, who's still on his rookie deal, actually is a net gain on the cap space. So the Seahawks actually gain $500K in cap space from this trade. I know that's crazy to think about, but it's actually true. So that's one aspect, is the Seahawks have extra cap space after this trade. The second aspect is Clowney, for all intents and purposes, has said he wants to, play for a Super Bowl ring, and the Seahawks are a lot more serious Super Bowl contenders with Jamal Adams on the roster. I don't know if you guys saw Jamal Adams in his like Snapchat or Instagram Live, whatever the heck the teens are using these days. Yeah, it was like, hey, Clowney, if you're hearing or you're listening, you might as well stay. So I think this trade increases the chances of that Clowney re-signs with the Seahawks.
Nathan, I see that look. What are you thinking?
Oh no, I'm still trying to figure out his contract situation. He signed a 4-year deal, but he has a 5th year that's completely unguaranteed.
Fifth year option. So he's a 1st-round pick.
Okay. All right. I don't know how much it will really matter. I can't imagine it would hurt the chances to bring Clowney back. I mean, for all the reasons that Evan just said.
Well, yeah. I mean, are we all agreed that that's the still the number one thing that they need to do to make this offseason successful is get, if it's Griffin or Clowney, would we all feel like, okay, they've addressed the pass rush the way they, in at least an acceptable way. I don't think any of us will, based on how they've done this, I don't think any of us will say they've done it the right way or the best possible way. But if they get one of those two guys for this year, it feels like they will have put themselves in position to be a much better pass rushing team than they were last year.
Mm-hmm. I think, and again, like I said, I'm a fan of Bruce Irvin, so I think adding him helped to a certain extent. But we also know that he won't just be a pass rusher; they'll move him all over. But I think that is the one thing that's left that Seattle fans have been clamoring for, that the media talks about, is that pass rush. And we saw how much better Seattle was with Clowney, how much better after they added Diggs. I think that was a huge piece of it too. And so I think that's still that one piece. You need a good pass rusher. Does it have to be elite level? I don't know, because now that I am a little more confident in the secondary, that I think that helps that too, to a certain extent. But I think that is still the one, and I don't even think it's a glaring hole, but it's still the hole that people are needing and wanting to be filled in order for this to be a successful offseason.
Yeah. And Nathan, I want to ask you, because the other thing that we've talked about a lot is nickel corner and slot corner. And you're talking about Marquise Blair and the impact this has on his career. What's your prognostication about where Blair fits into the coming year and how the Seahawks handle nickel corner, given what they currently have on the roster?
I mean, I think what they want to happen, I think what would be ideal is if you're playing Diggs and Adams in base, and then when you want to go to nickel, you slide Diggs down into the slot, and Blair comes in and plays next to Adams. I would be cautious about whether that can actually happen or not. Obviously, what we saw from Blair was tantalizing at times, but also needs to go a long ways. And like you said, Jamal Adams is not Earl Thomas, right? I know you guys kind of push back on the Cam comps. I actually think Adams is very similar to Cam in a lot of ways. You watch him take on blockers and stuff, and he will rock. Nobody is Cam, right? But there are a lot of similarities there. So it's not that Adams couldn't play single high, but that's not where he's best. And then I don't know that you either want Blair playing single high or that's where he's at his best either. So I think that's an awkward fit, even though sliding Diggs down into the slot feels pretty natural. But Adams did kind of play all over the place. So maybe it's finally the year that they do some big nickel stuff and they get a little creative with that. We've said it every year for about 5 years. They were going to draft Mark Barron. They were going to do all this cool stuff. It just keeps not happening. There are definitely a lot of ways that are possible to get them all on the field at the same time. I don't know that I think many of those or any of those will come to fruition.
Yeah, Evan, if you could, I think you've got a different perspective on how they're going to use Blair. I think you've got some impression that they're going to use Blair in the nickel, but how are you seeing that come about?
Yeah, I just think Blair is a playmaker. He causes turnovers. He's a big hitter. I think he could possibly compete with, I'm not saying this is for sure going to happen, but I could see him competing with Amadi at nickel. They didn't address that position in the offseason, at least not of my memory. I don't think they signed any nickel corners that were notable, didn't address it in the draft. So right now we just have Amadi there, and who else? So I just think with the two safety spots with Diggs and Jamal Adams, I'm still really excited about Blair as a prospect. That's the thing. And I feel kind of bad for him with this Adams trade, but if he's going to make the field, if he's going to get snaps, if he's going to get playing time, nickel corner is just the most realistic path forward, I think.
It's interesting, Dana. I look at Blair, and his body type to me is not a nickel corner. That's the part for me. I just cannot imagine him being the solution at nickel. I've been assuming this for a while now, that when people say that they've got this inside info or there's rumors that Blair's going to get on the field in nickel, I think it's more what Nathan was talking about, that that Quandre Diggs, who's played both nickel corner and safety, maybe can slide down, and Blair can play his natural safety position in the back, so he'll get a lot of snaps as a nickel safety, not as a nickel corner. But even then, let's assume that's the case. That does seem to put a ceiling on how Blair can be used. Like, he basically in that situation would be like, what was his name? What's our third safety? It started with a J back in the Legion of Boom era. Jerome
Johnson.
Yeah.
Jerron Johnson.
Jerron Johnson. Was that his name?
Jaron Johnson.
Yeah. It's Jerron. Yeah, Jerron Johnson.
Okay.
I follow him on Instagram. He's a good kid.
Okay.
He's a nice kid. Yeah. Kind of littler guy, a little smaller guy. Yeah. But, here's the thing with Blair. I agree with Evan. I think that what we saw last year out of him showed us that there's room for improvement, that there's a lot that can be improved on. And so I think that he's going to be another one of this is where I worry. I worry when Seattle starts trying to get people to fit into spots all over the place. We're moving Fant to here and this one to there. And he used to be offensive lineman and now he's, whatever. That makes me nervous. So I kind of agree with you a little bit there, but I do think that they must have a plan for him, because they were putting him in all kinds of different situations. Now, granted, sometimes they didn't have a choice, but because that's the players that they had. But I think that where I agree with Evan is that there's a lot of room for growth and potential, and where they kind of decide that is going to be, it will be interesting to watch. I think you're right. I think Diggs makes a little bit more sense to slide, but you just never know. They try and shove players into places they don't always need to be sometimes. So.
Yeah, well, you should know, Dana, you're getting lots of love in the chat. Everyone's really hoping that you're going to be a regular on the show. So we'll talk and figure out how often we can have you on and how often you're available. But one of the questions I have is, we're kind of closing in on an hour here, and I'm sure people have got to enjoy some of the sunshine that we rarely get around here. So let's talk about where this shifts things in the NFC West and the impact of Adams and where things change. So Nathan, you kind of touched on it earlier. Maybe we'll start with you on this, about how Adams can help against some of the ways that the different teams in the NFC West have attacked them. And I think you can kind of start with the 49ers being the odds-on favorite in the division. One, are we all agreed that the 49ers are still the odds-on favorite for the division title?
Heck no.
No.
Heck no. There's going to be a Super Bowl hangover with those guys. Like, their roster is not better than it was last year right now. It is worse. Yeah. They traded an all-pro away, an absolute stud, in DeForest Buckner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's who it was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Emmanuel Sanders is gone, right?
Yep.
Oh, where's he moved to?
He went to Denver, didn't he?
No, he came from Denver. I don't know where he went
Oh,
back to.
sorry.
He signed with somebody or something.
They definitely didn't sign him again. And their receivers are, like, other than Debo, are like rookies, like Brandon Ayuk and some of those guys.
He went to the Saints. Free agency like a lifetime ago.
I know, right? It's really hard.
Saints. He's with the Saints now.
Well,
so you don't think you think they're going to be a hangover? Knowing you, Evan, you probably think the Cardinals are the favorite because you're obsessed with.
They're not the favorite, but I think they're out of the Rams, 49ers, and the Cardinals themselves. I think the Cardinals are the most intimidating. And you know what? That Jamal Adams trade was less because of George Kittle and more because of DeAndre Hopkins.
I agree with that a little.
100%.
Really?
100%.
Fix that line in Arizona, though.
Even ever face each other? Like,
Kyler Murray is a little leprechaun back there. He's like a little Russell Wilson. Like he's magic
with the worst offensive line.
He's the second best quarterback in the NFC West.
Well, no, I
agree with.
I think he's a good quarterback. I don't understand the DeAndre Hopkins piece at all. To me, Jamal Adams is about, stopping the run and defending tight ends. Like, are the two things that I think he brings most. And then the bonus is that he also brings pass rush. And as we said before, he had more sacks, 6.5. I was wrong in my tweet. Yes, he had 6.5, and our leading sacker last year was Rasheem Green with 4. So, but yeah, like I do see it more as like being impactful in defending the run. And by the way, the Rams run the ball a lot. And
but now the really, so we don't have to worry about it anymore.
I know.
Wait, what'd you say?
They don't have to anymore, so.
Todd Gurley's no longer there, so he's not worried about the Rams running.
It means they're probably better though.
Yeah, they don't have a league average running back anymore. Is what
like his backup was actually like doing pretty well, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Wasn't it like CJ Anderson or something?
Yeah, well, that was a few years ago. So Nathan, I mean, is that your assessment as well? Like that's where like tight ends and running game are probably the places that Jamal Adams will have the biggest impact.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't want to put too much on it, but I don't think that I don't imagine that Pete Carroll loves that Sean McVay has his number. And I think Jamal Adams is a pretty good. If Pete can't slow down those Rams offenses led by Jared Goff, God, I can't remember anything anymore. And with Jamal Adams back there running around, I think that's going to be a pretty big hit to his pride. So,
yeah, why can't I just give up on Clowney? Why can't I just give up on it and be a happy dude and move on?
It's because, and I'm sorry, Dana, I'm completely pessimistic on this. The pass rush is catastrophically worse than what it was last year.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
So
yes, it is. And I will tell you why, Brian. Jadeveon Clowney is a top 15 pass rusher. You know who was also their second best pass rusher last year? And we all forgot that he left? Quentin Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
Quentin Jefferson. You know who they also lost? Not a pass rusher, but a good defensive lineman. Your favorite player, Al Woods, signed for like a $1 million deal with the Jags on a 1-year deal. You cannot tell me that adding like a 45-year-old Bruce Irvin on the defensive line with a rotational Benson Mayowa who plays like 10 snaps a game is equalizing that out. You cannot tell me that. It is catastrophically worse. And I'm not saying this to be a hot take.
I want to apologize for everybody listening that you had to turn down your volume.
It's the truth, Brian.
Regularly, that whenever Evan talks at the Evan decibel level that only like dogs and cats can actually hear, that people have to turn down their mics, that they blow out their ears. There's people jogging. There's going to be people jogging for the next week listening to this, and they're just gonna ears are gonna start bleeding.
Listening to my loud voice is less painful than what watching the pass rush is going to be like this year.
Okay.
So get ready.
Let's get to the content, and it is a stretch. It is a very generous to call it content of your argument there. So the Seahawks had the worst pass rush probably in the NFL last year. I mean, if not the worst, it's definitely in the conversation. And Jadeveon Clowney, as much as a huge fan of him as I am, and as much as I hope they sign him, was not a great pass rusher last year. He had a couple of games where he was a good pass rusher. And I'm not even talking about the fact he had 3 sacks. He has never in his career been an elite pass rusher. He's gotten to the point where he is an above average pass rusher, but he's never been an elite pass rusher. So
I mean, Pro Football Focus had him at 15 last year.
Well, I would just say I'm pretty sure Bruce Irvin and Benson Mayowa have had multiple years that have at higher pass rush efficiency than Jadeveon Clowney's ever had. Like, I don't know that for sure, and I can go and double check, but those guys have been efficient pass rushers over the past few years and pass rush specialists over the past few years. Are they the same level of player as Jadeveon Clowney? Of course not. But if we're talking specifically about pass rush, they are better pass rushers than Jadeveon Clowney. So now you have 2 guys that are better edge rushers than Jadeveon Clowney. So the other piece, and I know where this is going to go for some folks on this call, Jaron Reed was out for the first 6 games last year and did not play like himself for most of the year. You can't say that he will have there's no logic in saying 2 things: that his 10.5 sack year was an aberration and that last year was who he is. those two things can't both be necessarily true. Like, you can't have that perspective and say, well, hey, there could be two outliers. Let's find out what he actually is. Can he be a better interior pass rusher than what the Seahawks had last year? Has he proven to be a better interior pass rusher than Quentin Jefferson has at times? Yeah, he has. Not consistently, but he definitely has. Quentin Jefferson is completely romanticized by this fan base in ways that, like, I don't understand. The guy is at best a league average player. So I don't see the logic that the Seahawks are significantly worse at pass rush. Maybe you could argue they're similar, but I think in most cases, I think they're better pass rushing team. My criticism is they should have been a significantly better pass rushing team. There was so much opportunity for them to make this a great pass rush. And right now it is lukewarm. There's no way this is a great pass rush the way it is right now. And that's, to me, the unacceptable, absolutely awful part of this offseason that they had every opportunity to address. And what we don't know, there's the draft picks. That's the thing we don't know. We all assume LJ Collier is going to suck. I don't know about Dana. Dana might be more optimistic than me. I don't expect anything from LJ Collier. But then you got, what is it? I'm going to forget names. Is it Darrell Taylor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I get it right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then the other guy they drafted this year, Allen Robinson. No, not Allen Robinson.
Robinson is the one everyone's excited about to see kind of what he can do. Yeah. You know, those mid-round draft picks, again, why I'm not so upset about the first rounds being gone. Those mid-round draft picks are so fun to watch.
Alton Robinson. Thank you, Agent Michael Scarn on chat. Yes. So, like, I think there's some unknowns there, but Evan, there is no way it is nearly as vitriolic as
you're doing is you're expecting older rotational players to come in and play full-time snaps. And you're telling me they are going to have a greater net impact than the impact Clowney had on the pass rush last year? Are you really telling me that? Yes. That's insanity.
I don't think they're going to be full-time. I don't know where you're getting that from. I think they're rotational players still.
I mean, so I'm like 99% on your side here, Brian. I do.
Woo! Go on.
I do wonder though, like, what is, like, from a base defense perspective, right? Where you're not getting Irvin and Mayowa. Like, there may be packages that they roll out there where they are catastrophically worse as a pass rushing unit because, you know, Clowney was a 3-down guy and he could do anything you want. He could stop the run. He could rush the passer, right? And we have seen, you know, where Pete is sometimes he's just more cautious against the run, right? And so there may be times where they're less likely to put their actual pass rushers on the field. In those situations, you may see a really big drop off.
Actually,
anything where anything where you've got, you know, those guys on the field, and I think the versatility that they provide, even though that they're, you know, individually not as good at pass rushers as Clowney, I do think that, you know, it's a wash probably from a pass rushing perspective.
Brian, we may disagree on the pass rush, but you know is going to be significantly worse than what is going to be significantly worse this year than last year. I can almost guarantee you is our run stopping defense. Al Woods. Yeah,
I think our interior defensive line, you know, I 100% agree.
Al Woods and Clowney were big run stoppers. Huge.
They were, and I don't think that they've addressed the interior defensive line. I think Poona Ford was not the player that I think we hoped he would be last year. Doesn't mean he won't be this year, but I don't think he was the world beater that we were hoping for. So, yeah, I think that's absolutely fair that that's a big question mark. Yeah, it'll be interesting, but I will bet you, Evan, and we can figure out the terms on this, but I will bet you that Bruce Irvin and Benson Mayowa will have more sacks than Jadeveon Clowney. And we'll even do advanced stats if you want. We can do pass pressures or hits or whatever.
Well, I'm trying to think about what the best measure would be.
Then Jadeveon Clowney and what was the guy that
Quentin Jefferson
last year?
Oh.
So last year, Bruce Irvin had more sacks than Clowney, Jefferson, and Ziggy Ansah all together.
That's it, Ziggy Ansah. So yes, so Clowney, Ansah, and Jefferson. I will give you all three of those guys against just Irvin and Mayowa.
No,
On
just
pass
just give me Clowney and Quentin Jefferson. I
Okay.
just want two.
Okay.
It's an easy win for me. I'm
Okay.
going to be
So
dining at
6.5.
Daniel's
Name the
Broiler.
terms. Name the
6.5
terms.
sacks.
Are we talking sacks? Are we talking pressures? What are we talking?
I don't know if sacks is the best measure.
I feel like you should just do team-wide pressure rate. Was there
No.
pressure rate?
No.
Evan, Nathan, let him pick his own grade, please. Stay out of this.
Who is the better average pressure rate between the two players? So add the two players, average it, and then
Okay, so we're going with we want to go with PFF's pass rush productivity, which is pressures and hits and sacks.
I think that's probably the best. Yeah.
You'll go with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna say that combining Quentin Jefferson and Jadeveon Clowney from last year, you're saying they will be better than Benson Mayowa and Bruce Irvin this year.
Yeah. I'll take you and Rachel out to Daniel's Broiler if I'm wrong.
Done.
Done.
Do you guys factor in injury to this at all, or is it just got
Ooh.
or the new
Assuming there's
COVID
no-
IR?
Well, because we're doing efficiency, it shouldn't be super impacted, right?
Mhm.
So unless there's a catastrophic injury.
Yeah.
I think we should say a minimum combined 12 games played.
Sure. That's cool with me.
Make sure there's some sample size to it. All right. So we're past the hour here. Anything else that folks wanted to talk about? Hey, Alex.
She made me butterbeer. We have
What is
we have
butterbeer?
What is butterbeer? What? I am disgusted, appalled. Harry Potter? Did you have a childhood?
Yeah.
It was just about 30 years before yours, Evan.
Okay, that's a fair point. It's an amazing. I guess it's not alcoholic in Harry Potter.
No, it's basically butterscotch and ginger ale.
But my wife put
Oh.
a ton of crack and rum in here. So
Oh,
Okay.
What?
Kraken.
Kraken rum.
no, I heard what you heard the first time too.
Crack and
No,
rum.
I
That's what I heard too.
that was the joke. That was the joke, you guys. I purposely stopped at crack because I don't know if. By the way, that name for that hockey team I think is brilliant. I
I do
love
too.
the Kraken.
I love
It would answer so many questions if you actually were on crack and rum, Evan. I think so many questions would be answered.
Seahawks make me feel like I'm on crack sometimes. That's how.
Yeah.
That's this emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
So Daniel's Broiler. That's the deal. Daniel's
is.
Broiler.
We,
All right.
We now have this on record and many witnesses.
So
that-
average pressure rate between Quentin Jefferson and Jadeveon Clowney versus Mayowa and Urban, correct?
Yes.
Wait, I have a question. How's this going to be adjusted if Clowney's back in Seattle?
No, this is just
Just last year versus this year. Okay.
Last year versus this year. So last year's is already locked in, and we're just talking about Irvin and Mayowa this year. Yeah. I would like to, I already have the double or nothing ready for you after it starts going the wrong way for you to give you a chance, and that'll be around total team pressures. Because
Wait, I need to make sure we're talking about the correct terms here. I'm talking about what Clowney and Quentin Jefferson do this year.
no.
No.
Last year.
No.
You said
That
last
makes no
year.
sense. You said this.
Why would it not be this year?
You said that
they don't play
this
in
year's
Seattle.
pass rush is going to be significantly worse than last year's.
Okay.
So the point is, what was last year's pass rush rate with those two players that you're so fond of
Okay, no, that's fair.
versus,
Still,
versus
fair.
this year for those
No.
two games?
I still think that's an easy win. Yeah, I'll take that.
All right. Well done. Nathan, Dana, anything else before we wrap up?
I just want to say that I pulled a lot of punches on running back comments today. I'm very nice to our guests. So if anyone is out there like, I'd love to be a guest, but I'm afraid I'm going to get yelled at for my running back opinions, I can be nice. That's all.
My running back
job,
opinion is
Nathan.
God love Marshawn Lynch. That's my whole running back opinion. So, that's my whole running back opinion.
I just want you to know we're gonna have a dedicated Evan loses his shit show when Chris Carson gets an extension. I just want you to know that.
Yeah. Wear earmuffs. It's not going to be pretty. Dana, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Oh, thank you guys
taking
for
some of
having
your
me.
Sunday. For folks that are joining late, please follow Dana at Dana, DAYNAOG. And that's for O'Gorman, by the way, on Twitter. And, follow her pod. Where can they find your pod and other stuff that you're working on?
Again, I write for Our Turf Football, which is ourturffb.com. And then we have under the same name, Our Turf FB on YouTube. You can find us there too.
All right. Okay. Nathan, Evan, it was awesome seeing you guys. Let's hope that the next show we do does not involve Antonio Brown being signed.
No.
That would not be good. I think we're all united on that.
Mm-hmm.
But man, today is July 26th. That means training camp starts now, right?
Next week, yeah.
I think for all this, back and forth about COVID regulations within the NFL and everything, it sure feels like football's going to happen. I mean, it might not be the smart decision, but I think at this rate, it looks like it might.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I guess we will find out, like everything else going on this year. It's a wait and see kind of thing. So thanks everybody for joining. It's been great in the chat seeing you. If you haven't already, please go ahead and join at patreon.com/hawkblogger, support the show, tell your friends, leave a review, subscribe, hit the little bell to get notified when we go live. And if you didn't see earlier, we set our record for charitable donations this year. We donated $40,000 to charity this year. Now up over $170,000 that we've been able to donate from the show to charity over the years. So your support means a lot and goes to great places. And I really appreciate that. So we're getting started. The season's kind of getting started, folks. So hopefully we'll have more great content and more things to talk about very soon. And until then, please stay safe and go Hawks.